Hey, government students. This is attempt 2 at me trying to record this thing. For some reason, it stopped working, so now I'm starting over. But I did get the unfortunate practice of having to listen to my own voice when I watched the last video. Anyway, now you guys are going to get to listen to my voice like you will usually do. Hope you guys are doing well. I know this whole thing is kind of crazy and can be a little challenging, but I hope everyone's doing really well and taking care of themselves and not going too stir crazy yet. That can happen later. All right, so let me show you a little bit about what we're going to be doing. Uh, every day in here, you guys are going to be doing your attendance. Where did that go? I thought, oh, practice class. So first thing you guys are going to do every day at 1:45 when it's government time is go to Mr. Aaron Attendance. So you'll go in there. It'll pull up a little question for you to prove that you were here during your social studies time. So today's is, what are you thankful for? So what am I thankful for today? I am thankful for my students. Had some other teachers and friends ask me how I felt about teaching from home, and I said, well, it's a pain because my favorite thing about teaching is interacting with all of you guys. So you take that out of it, and this isn't nearly as fun. But there had submitted what I was thankful for today. Now I have shown Mr. Aaron that I am here in attendance. So you've done that part. That's the first thing you're going to do. For today, and by the way, today is Wednesday, March 18th. What you guys are going to do is we're going to do some notes together. So what I think you should do is you guys should have a video, the one you're currently watching, something that looks maybe like this. And what I want you guys to do is pull it to the side like this and make it half of your screen. So you'll be watching on half your screen. The other half of your screen, you guys are going to have your notes. Let's go to government first period, classwork. And then under Judicial Branch, you'll see the judicial system notes. And this will be the other half of your notes, or the other half of your screen. So again, you can pull that down, separate it, make it half of your screen. There. Now we got half of our screen is the video over here, which you're watching me currently on. Then the other half is your notes. So you can watch and listen while you type in your notes. What is jurisdiction? Type it in there. All right, so let's go over some of those notes together. So I want to remind you guys that as we're going over these notes, if you need more time, all you have to do is hit pause on the video. So once you hit pause on the video, you can take your time in typing all the notes out. So I'm going to talk about everything as we go through them. And at any point, hit pause so you can continue filling them out if you need to. All right, let's get started on these notes. So what does jurisdiction mean? I'm pretty sure we've answered this question a couple of times already. But jurisdiction, that is the authority of a court to rule on certain cases. So jurisdiction would be some courts have the jurisdiction to rule on specific cases. Other courts have the power and authority to rule on other cases. So the example I always give is when we're at school, Mr. Aaron has the jurisdiction, has the authority to give you a restricted lunch for hitting someone at school. But if we're at Kroger or we are somewhere else in town and I see you hit your brother or sister in the arm, I don't have the authority, I don't have the jurisdiction to give you a restricted lunch there. Now, maybe someone else in your family has that authority, that jurisdiction in that setting. Mr. Aaron doesn't. So, jurisdiction has to do with who has authority when. Appellate jurisdiction is the authority held by a court to hear a case that is appealed from a lower court. So, as you can see down here, we have appeal. So let's make sure we know what that means. Appeal means applying to a court for a reversal of a decision of the lower court. So if you have a case, and let's say you are found guilty for something, and you don't think you deserve to be guilty, you can appeal that result to a higher level court. And if that court accepts it, you can try the case again and maybe get a reversal of your decision. So any court that is capable of hearing those appeals from the lower courts, that's what appellate jurisdiction means. All right. So next part of the notes. So if we were at school and you were doing this in your textbook, maybe some of you already started this. This would have been back in this Constitution specific part. So which article of the Constitution is the judicial branch created? That would be Article 3. We've talked about this a few times as well. So remember, Article 1 is our legislative branch. Article 2 is our executive branch. Article 3 is our judicial branch. And in the Constitution, it says specifically, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court. Article 3 doesn't have a ton of information. It's not really specifically laid out what our judicial system is going to look like. That was left up to Congress to decide how that was going to go and let it evolve over time, which it has. So who has the power to create courts inferior to the Supreme Court? Essentially, Article 3 only created the Supreme Court and then let Congress figure out how all the other courts were going to work. So those inferior courts, those ones less than the Supreme Court, were created by Congress. It also says when judges hold office. That means during good behavior. Now, in practice, and I think maybe that's the next part. No, we'll talk about that later. But in practice, in good behavior, as the Constitution puts it, really means so long as they're not misbehaving in any way, any major way at least, and they don't die. So once they become a federal judge, they get that position until they retire, they die, or they get impeached, which no Supreme Court judge has actually been removed from office. One has been impeached, but he wasn't found guilty. So in the Constitution, federal courts, how many Supreme Court justices are there? There are currently 9. It hasn't always been 9, but it's been 9 for a long time, since the 1800s. So that is up to Congress to decide. Congress has created a system of federal district courts and courts of appeals. We'll talk more later about what that really means, but we've got these different kinds of courts. We got our appeals courts and our district courts, which act as trial courts. The term good behavior, I mentioned that a minute ago. That means judges serve for life or they choose to retire. Now, I don't know. There's on my screen right now, there's some little something there. Oh, maybe I can exit that. Close. All right, there we go. Choose to retire. So now you guys should be able to see my full screen. Remember, hit pause if I'm going too fast and you keep typing it. Let's make sure this is still recording. Good. Still recording. My first video I attempted to do this, it stopped recording and it didn't tell me, so I was talking for a long time without it recording, and that was not exciting. All right, Section 2 of Article 3. What cases does the judicial power extend to? So this is, what does our judicial system have the power or the authority in? So anything that deals with law and equity, anything arising under the Constitution, laws of the United States, and treaties made. All of these things our federal courts can deal with. Again, hit pause if you need more time to type that in. So what is the basic law that American courts took over from Great Britain? So this is a concept that our founding fathers were familiar with thanks to their history with the British system. But that's common law. Common law builds on itself. This idea that law is going to evolve over time, and we will learn lessons and set a precedent and continue with that. Now, statute law are laws that are passed by Congress. These are going to be more set in stone. They are more specific. What other kinds, other than statutes, of cases do federal courts deal with? Treaties, cases involving the Constitution, and maritime law. So treaties, remember what treaties are from history class. Those are our relations with other countries. Anything that has to do with the Constitution, how we're interpreting it, the laws in it, what it means. Those are all things federal courts will deal with. And then maritime law. So what does maritime jurisdiction cover? Maritime means anything that's on the sea, really. Anything that's on the water. Maritime, think of marine animals, the same prefix there. So all sorts of cases involving ships and shipping on the high seas, on rivers, canals, lakes. Sometimes these could be state issues if they are within the state entirely, but a lot of times they're going to be federal issues if they're out on the ocean, if they're on rivers between states, stuff like that. When the state is a party in a case, the federal courts have jurisdiction. So if you decide you're going to sue the state of Ohio for something, then that would be settled in a federal court. So what other kinds of jurisdiction do the Supreme Court have? They also have appellate jurisdiction. The Supreme Court, we'll talk more specifically about this in a section a little bit later, but the Supreme Court has both original jurisdiction, which means they can see cases and have authority to rule on cases for the first time, as well as appellate jurisdiction, which means they can see cases that have already been done by a lower court that has been appealed to them. Most of the things they see are appeals. So there it is. What is original jurisdiction? The court has the authority to be the first court to hear the case. So the very first time that this issue goes into court, that would be a court that has original jurisdiction. What cases does a court with appellate jurisdiction hear? Cases that have been appealed from lower courts. So we've mentioned that a couple times already. What kind of cases does Supreme Court mostly hear? Those are appeals from lower courts. Most of those big Supreme Court cases that we will reference and you guys have maybe heard of and will hear about are usually appeals from lower courts. A lot of the court cases that you guys will hear in the news or just hear in general are Supreme Court cases. When you hear something v. something else, that means it's a court case. And more often than not, it's been a Supreme Court case. So if you ever hear in politics someone's reference Roe v. Wade, that means that Roe is going against Wade in the court. Or Marbury v. Madison. And that'll be a court case that we talk about a little bit later too. So Section 2, Part 3 in the Constitution. This is in Article 3 still. Where are trials of all crimes held? They're going to be held in the state where this crime has been committed. So if you commit a crime in Ohio and then flee to Arizona, you will be returned to Ohio. and then your court case, your trial will be held in Ohio because that's where the crime was committed. Now, it's possible some of those other states will want to try you for a crime as well if the crime involves crossing the state. So, when does the right to a trial by jury not exist? So, we talk about you have a right to trial by jury, by your peers. That is not the case in the cases of impeachment because that's a completely different kind of trial. That is not a traditional trial that's held in the courts. That is a trial that is held in Congress. And you guys all, if you're paying attention, get to see that firsthand with our third impeachment in history of a president with Donald Trump this past year. Section 3 of Article 3 in the Constitution. No person shall be convicted of treason unless. So this lays out if someone is being treasonous to our country, what needs to happen in order for us to convict them for being treasonous? They have to have the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act. So you have to have 2 different people say they saw or can present evidence that they know you did whatever this treasonous act was. Or the person has to confess. Now, the reason they laid out these things is in the past, we would have issues where kings or other high officials would throw people in jail for being treasonous and not need any evidence to back it up. So it made it really easy for kings and queens to just throw you in court if they disagreed with you or didn't like what you were doing or saying. But now our Constitution lays it out specifically. There has to be 2 different people seeing you do that, or you have to admit to it. So this is exactly what we were talking about. So why did the framers carefully define treason? The charge of treason was so often used or abused by monarchs to get rid of people who opposed them. So you were saying bad things about the king. King didn't like that, so they said you were being treasonous, and they could throw you in jail. Or maybe you weren't doing anything at all, and they just don't like you. Or they suspect something that you did, even if you didn't do it. They'd throw you in jail without needing evidence. Now, we have to have those 2 witnesses. Section 3 and says party 2 should be part 2, but we can have a party. So who has the power to declare the punishment for treason? That's Congress. Congress gets to decide what the punishment will be if you have committed a treasonous act. Who cannot be punished for treason? The children of the person convicted of treason. Now, the reason that this happened was, again, this was abused by monarchs in the past. They could throw you in jail for seemingly doing nothing but saying that you were treasonous, and then not only punish you, but punish your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids and all the generations following. Well, when our founders were writing our Constitution, they decided that is really unfair. Children should not be punished for the crimes committed by their parents. So we made sure to put that in there specifically, that the children of the person cannot be punished, only the person who actually committed the treason. All right, so that's the first section of our notes. I think we're going to stop there for today. Please give me some feedback on how you think this worked out. If you guys think that I went too fast or too slow, or need to, if you have any other suggestions, this is my first time doing it too. So we're learning this together. If you have some other teachers who have some good ideas about how to do this, let me know. Don't worry about continuing on to the next set of the notes. We'll do that later. But for now, I hope you guys are doing well. I hope to hear from you guys today and going forward. Feel free to email me at any time. I'll also be on Google Classroom. I'm available a lot of different times if you're emailing me or leaving notes on the classroom, but I will definitely be available during your social studies time, which is 1:45 to 3 p.m. I hope you guys are doing well. I miss you, and please take care.